to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much, Pete.
We're blessed to have a guest this week, a very special guest. You want to introduce our guest for us, Julie?
We are, for sure. I'd love to introduce Dave Polacheck. This is someone that I admire a great deal for his work in the HR space, and I'm excited to be able to have some conversation with him today in the podcast and share that with him. Dave and I met working when I was working for Goodyear. Nice. He's been a practitioner forever. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself, but we spent fair amount of time, a year or more, probably working on some pretty big initiatives, and have been following him since. So, Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Dave.
Welcome.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Look forward to talking with you guys. Yeah, Julie and I met when we were getting ready to spend some pretty big dollars for Goodyear on a whole new, payroll services technology strategy for that's still in play today. So that was a big project that we did together. I look forward to chatting with you guys today. I'm a longtime HR guy, as Julie mentioned. I started out on the shop floors at GE. I like to say I started out doing HR with steel-toed shoes, all the FMLA tracking and employee discipline, union relations, all that stuff. And then also was kind of bouncing back and forth between manufacturing HR and headquarters, big project management stuff. So leading for one of the business units in Oracle HR implementation, and just got to do a whole lot of interesting projects over the years, followed GE people a couple of times. Again, implementing technology, managing operational vendors, and doing a lot in the analytics space as that was sort of evolving within the HR function. And then for the last few years before joining Julie at Harry & Palmer, I've been at the Hackett Group doing similar to this advisory work, benchmarking work, and other things, supporting HR leaders as they worked on their strategy, structure, analytics, dashboards, the whole bit.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, it's good to have you, Dave. I know analytics has been something that I see a lot in my research. I know, Julie, it's front of mind for folks out there. And, it's cool to hear your background, Dave. You have it sounds like a very frontline manager experience that you can rely on here to draw upon in your work. So yeah, good stuff. And I take it you're both Goodyear, Michigan? Yeah.
Michigan for me.
Michigan. Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. We could talk about that offline, I guess. But look, so it's great to have you, Dave. I know you've recently written a blog about this very topic, right? Analytics and the barriers to it. So we're excited to dive into that a little bit later on. So look, Julie, not much news this week to talk about. It's quiet time. The year just kicked off. Everyone's probably got their heads down preparing their roadmaps and budgets for the year. So not a lot to talk about on the vendor front.
Yeah, very, very quiet. I agree. But Pete, maybe we should at least let folks know that that you've kind of shifted direction a little bit very recently. So why don't you at least give a little bit of an idea?
Yeah. So as maybe most of you have seen or heard by now, I have made a return back to the analyst space after a pause working for one of the vendors in the marketplace. I've decided, it's really where I belong. It's really where my heart is. And it's what I feel like I should be doing, right? Helping the industry advance itself and being a voice for that. So I'm really excited to say that I am back as an independent analyst. I already have some clients I'm working with. I'm very excited to be working in and around at first here in payment services, payroll, global EOR, even some HCM tech I've already started doing some things with. So I'm really excited. It's been fun so far this month, just getting back out there, getting reengaged. And I've got some big announcements coming. Another major announcement I'm going to make here, within the next few weeks, probably by our next episode, and just a packed agenda for me personally. I'm really excited to be doing a bunch of different little things around the industry. So look for that. So glad to be back. Excited.
Awesome. Well, without any further ado, why don't we kind of move into the topic of analytics? And what I think was exciting about having Dave in here and talking about the topic is specifically the angle of his blog, which is breaking the barriers to HR analytics. It seems like, that holy grail that companies have been talking about getting to forever, never. And they're always bemoaning, how they haven't gotten there and what they need to do to get there. And so, Dave, what inspired you to, kind of take a crack at some of the biggest barriers and putting them out there for folks who are in this perpetual situation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for me, it kind of bridges my work as a practitioner and then my work with so many different companies of all sizes, especially a lot of the larger companies as it related to their analytics strategy. And what what I saw, first of all, is in my own career, there was so much we were able to do with just some very basic tools using Excel and other like simple visualizations to help move the needle on certain things. And what was interesting to me was getting into the consulting arena and working with so many large companies that were putting predictive analytics. So this is probably, say, go back 5 years. Everybody was saying predictive analytics is the thing. All HR leaders or so many that we were talking to were excited about it. And yet when you talk to them about, well, what are you trying to predict? The predictive analytics is about, using history to predict future or some version of that. And I remember, a first meeting as we were rolling out a framework for this in talking with a large high-tech company and talking to their CHRO, and what do you want to predict? And they said, well, we were trying to figure out how to predict attrition, and we're trying to have a more predictable talent pipeline to leadership level roles. And that seemed to be, those two topics seem to be the hot topics that have persisted in the analytics arena. But from what we've seen, so many companies really struggle to crack the nut. And what I saw was, for many of them, is it was this excitement about predictive analytics as a set of tools that they wanted to have in their toolbox, but without a clear agenda of what business impact they were trying to bring. And so that's the first barrier that obviously you guys have seen in the blog, is just the idea that there's all this hype about predictive analytics, but it's just a tool or a set of tools. You have to have a problem to solve in order for those tools to actually bear fruit. And so what we see is a huge difference between those companies that apply predictive analytics to specific problems and set out as their HR agenda that we're going to solve these handful of really gnarly business problems through analytics, versus those that say we're going to get really good at analytics without attaching it to a business problem. So that's the first one, as I see, is just like so many things that go through a hype cycle. There's an excitement about using the tools, maybe buying some technology, maybe hiring a data scientist, and yet there aren't the problems to solve. And the HR business partner population that hopefully would be creating demand for these kind of activities in analytics don't yet have the acumen to tease out business problems as analytic problems. So that further compounds it. So I'll pause there, but those are some of the key themes that I saw coming into it.
Yeah. I think something very interesting about that is, I bet often when you start a conversation and you're asking somebody really an open-ended question about what do you want to predict, what are you trying to get to, I can imagine a lot of blank stare responses. In fact, I know I've seen some of them myself. And so it seems to be there's a little bit of a conundrum that a lot of the technologies are trying to put forward modules or bundles or packets of things that they're guessing are the predictive things that their clients want to get to. And yet in some ways, doesn't that just hinder the process of really thinking about what what is it that is going to be the big nut that you want to crack, right?
Right. I think if I'm understanding your question, I think that's a great point to bring out, is that when you have vendors, technology providers providing pre-canned analytics, it presupposes the problems to be solved. I think about an early client that we met with, a similar kind of problem. They were approaching analytics as a capability to build without a problem to solve. Yep. And so we started talking about is, well, what is it that you want to analyze that would drive real business results? This was a nationwide lawn care company. They lay people off in the cooler climates. They lay people off in the winter, rehire them in the summer. They saw that there was some correlation between employee retention during that off season and client retention to sign back up the next year for their lawn care services. And now there's a real problem you can go after with analytics. It's super specific to their industry, to their company, and the way they staff the work. And I think that's what kind of calls out the need for really diving in deep on your particular business issues that are certainly industry specific, if not more specific than that to your specific company.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me a little bit, and I think we've talked about this maybe, Julie, is the RPA, I wouldn't say fad, but a lot of people got involved in RPA, and I think they thought, we got to be doing RPA because our peers are doing it. And then when you talk to them, it's like, well, what are you going to solve with this? Right. It's what's the use case that you're going after? And then, they kind of step back. And And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like having something to go solve is certainly a key starting point. But
hi, this is Stacey Harris.
And this is Terry Zipper. And we're the host of the two podcasts under the HR Huddle.
On Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, we uncover the latest trends, truths, and challenges from Sapient Insight Group's groundbreaking research and our analyst insights, serving up everything you need to know about HR tech with no sugarcoating.
And on HR, we have a problem. We tackle the toughest workplace challenges head on, offering you expert advice and actionable solutions to help HR leaders thrive in today's fast-changing world. Whether you want the scoop on tech or tools to solve people problems, we've got you covered.
Take a listen and subscribe. If you want to become part of our community, we'd love to see you.
You know, the interesting thing that I find in my work is I look at a lot of these products from the buyer side and from my side to understand what's being proliferated, how it's helping buyers. And one of the things that comes about a lot of times with the buyers is they stormed off, and maybe you mentioned this a little bit, right? They bought this product, they bought the new bell or the whistle that they thought was going to be the thing, and then they said, well, we didn't really use it well. We don't think we're getting out of it what we thought. And what's interesting is, right, we've talked about this, Julie, the Sapient report this year, analytics was one of the key areas that firms want to replace, which I think like, well, right. Gosh, many of you are struggling with analytics to begin with. How can you go and think about replacing something? You probably aren't even maxing out what you have. So I wonder sometimes, to your point, if there are a lot of organizations that do that, right? We have to do analytics just like everyone else. They storm off, they buy the thing, they put it in place, and they go, oh, I don't feel very predictive, Yeah. And so I think there is that focus of really understanding what you're trying to become. Right?
I think some of that is because there's a journey, right? There's a transformation journey that happens even before you get to predictive analytics, and that is, you're in a legacy reports environment. And so then you get new tools, and it's like, oh, with new tools come new reports, right? So you want to try to leverage that. But then, you also now have tools that focus less on pushing reports and more on dashboards. So that's a massive change from, where maybe you're starting or you're trying to get to. And then those dashboards can bring, predictive templates, which we just talked about, which are, presupposing what the issues are. And so some folks are going to go through that progression in their journey to get to predictive analytics because the technology is leading them there. And yet I think oftentimes leaders are the ones who are saying, no, I want to find the nut. I want to solve the nut. And
they want the ROI right away.
Yeah, they want the ROI, but they also maybe have particular problems that they're really trying to focus in on. And that might not allow for the time to take that, walk, crawl, run, or whichever order you do those things in, right? To get to, to what the leadership is hoping to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've seen along those lines is that the way I say it is curiosity dies when it's so hard to do the analytics in the first place, or it's so hard just to pull the data together from multiple sources from across the world, sending out templates, getting data back in. If you're not ready to deliver interesting analytics and reporting on the fly, your business leaders know that. They know that when I ask for data or an analysis, it's going to take you 6 months, and you're going to come back to me with something that has maybe some flaws in the data or other assumptions. And so you're going to back to the drawing boards. And as a leader, they just lose curiosity for this HR stuff. They're like, you know what, I'm going to focus on analytics more in the finance or logistics or elsewhere in the business, because HR really just can't support our level of curiosity as leaders. And so the curiosity dies. So I feel like that's where, to your point, Julie, you got to be on a progression and you got to keep it moving.
Do you think that's a skill issue though? Do you think that's a skill issue in the business? Maybe there's just a skills gap in knowing how to do this to some extent?
Some of it surely is, because it's not, we know that there are a shortage of resources that have that unique combination of curiosity and analytical ability to be able to do this well. But I also think, as they're saying with the time lapse there, the leaders are probably getting 20 hunches to use as sources of information while waiting, anything that's fact-based or data-based. And so at a certain point in time, information is coming faster from less complicated sources, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would say it's, Pete, and I totally agree. There's a skill issue, and it's really multifaceted. So there's a skill issue in that you may or may not have the data expert, the analytical expert that can, run the numbers for you. Your HR population out in the field, I alluded to this earlier, may not have the acumen. They've got all kinds of great HR skills, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say those HR people without analytical skills can't add value anymore. They surely can through all of the other great things they do, facilitation and talent brokering and assessment and those kinds of things. But analytics isn't their specialty, and yet we're relying on them to take business conversations and translate them into analytical questions. So there's a skill gap out there in the field too. And then there's just the core muscle memory of data management. And that's all the excitement for analytics falls flat. The first conversation where an executive says, time out, what's the denominator there? And where'd you get that number? And that data's out of date. All of a sudden, all the great analysis you've done falls flat because So I think there's a lot of different skill sets embedded here.
Yeah. For anyone curious enough to find the blog, like this is your third bullet, right, Dave? Which is data management equals nerddom. And there's some truth in that, right?
Yeah, but back to the skills thing and to what you're saying. I mean, I think the frontline manager, right? We're asking a lot of them today when it comes to being just on the front lines of doing their job, but then also having to be an HR person in a lot of ways, having to be career coach, life coach, all these other things. And now, oh, by the way, we need you to be a data scientist also. Do you think that the products that are out there, Dave, are setting these managers up to actually be successful, or do you think it's too much, not enough? What are your thoughts just from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to, I'll use an example. So Visier is a great tool, and this is not a critique of it as a tool. But what I've seen from talking to Visier clients as an example, and it's an example that I see across other technologies similarly, is that you get a handful of people that are excited about it, and they're leveraging the crap out of it and providing great analytics for the small handful of clients that they have. But it's that mass of other HR folks or line managers who have access to that data, but just don't have the skills to either use the tools you've given them, or it's less about being able to use the tools. It's more about being able to look at a chart and a graph and tell themselves a story based on that they can go act on. Yeah. So I feel like those tools are great, but what I've heard from clients that use them is that the challenge is still there to go from a core tight cadre of folks that love the data to the masses of either HR or line managers to leverage it to become more analytical in their general thinking. It's a bridge that just doesn't, nobody's figured out how to build it.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you referring to the what to do about it sort of part in that case?
It's really both. I feel like there's some skills around analytics that maybe aren't fully unpacked yet. Yeah. And it's around taking somebody whose mind works a certain way, who focuses on certain aspects of their role as an HR leader, and you're really asking their brain to work a little bit differently. Right. Turn a little bit differently. And I think that's where the gap is, especially because we're all busy. And so taking the time to slow down and really retool yourself, which of course everybody's challenged to do right now, is tough.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Well, I think it also gets to the idea that oftentimes we're expecting to find those types of skills in other parts of the organization that are not HR. And so, I do see a number of times where HR is almost happy to say, oh yeah, and then pass that to the BI or to the data lakes, or let somebody else figure out how to do that. And what I'm seeing more and more is some pushback from a data security and data privacy perspective, because the types of information that are incumbent in HR analytics in particular, and people analytics, do have elements of PNII and other sorts of people-related prospects. And so where HR is extremely favorable and wants to dig in and enable itself, I usually find folks that are very in tune with the fact that these HR technology and tools are built with PII and data privacy and security issues in mind that are less important in other back office functions, right?
Yeah. Understood. So yeah, Dave, there was the second barrier that you put up was the be careful what you look for, and this is the one area I wanted to talk about myself. So tell me what you meant by that, and how do you prevent that?
Yeah,
well, not prevent it, because you're going to be looking for things, but how do you prevent maybe stepping in a hole, I guess? As you go.
I think the thing is, when you go to root cause a problem, you don't know what root cause you're going to find.
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon what you find, there's a whole set of diverse interventions it's going to take to solve the problem you find. And so, and some of them require really tough cultural changes, or making some serious shifts in how you think about leadership and turning over leaders that aren't.
Visionary voices, bold breakthroughs. This is Shally's Alley, where top recruiting minds spill their best-kept secrets live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Raw, unfiltered conversations on sourcing, hiring, and the future of talent, where we ask the tough questions no one else will. Tune in and level up.
Hey, I'm Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackie Clayton.
We're your hosts of the Inclusive AF podcast, where we take on DEI, leadership, and HR without all the corporate fluff.
That's right. We've got decades of experience, a lot of opinions, and zero tolerance for performative anything.
Every week, we dig into what it really takes to build inclusive workplaces with honesty, strategy, and a few side eyes.
We'll talk about the tough stuff, power dynamics, privilege, what's broken in the system, and how we can all do better.
And don't worry, it's not all heavy. We bring receipts, laughs, and real talk from people actually doing the work.
Think of it as your weekly dose of truth, tips, and a little tea to help you lead with intention and show up for your people.
So if you're ready to push past the buzzwords and get into the actual work of inclusion,
you're in the right place. So subscribe to the Inclusive AF podcast.
New episodes drop every week.
Catch us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll be here breaking it down one inclusive convo at a time.
Living up to new expectations and whatnot. And there's a lot of pressure once you've found a problem.
Yeah.
to have all the skills you need, which are diverse, in order to solve it. So, what's that?
And the authority.
And the authority, yeah. So, if you're looking at attrition and you're figuring out where you have pockets of higher levels of attrition in your organization, and you're able to attribute some of that to a style of leadership, through exit interviews or engagement surveys or whatnot, pulse checks, and you realize, okay, I have an attrition issue that's focused on maybe a particular segment of the workforce or a particular part of the organization. Are you willing to turn over leaders, if that's part of the problem, in order to solve it? Or do you have the patience to change culture, a 3 to 5 year culture change journey? Like that's what you find at the root of some of the analytics that you're going to do. And these are intractable problems that are not that aren't easy, and they require really the whole talent cycle in order to gradually evolve. So depending upon what type of analysis you're looking at, you can find yourself root causing to really tough problems to solve that are going to call upon, and I think this is the other aspect of it, is you're calling upon HR to come in and deliver in a whole bunch of different ways to shift the culture or to break your glass ceilings or whatever it is that you've root caused. And that means you got to be firing on all cylinders. You got to be able to change culture. You got to be able to change your technology. You got to be able to, do the data management stuff, change your talent processes, all those kinds of things.
It sounds like change management comes along with finding out some of these revelations, I guess, maybe not revelations, but it's you're right. Be careful what you look for, right? You're going to go find a problem. You're going to find a problem and you're going to need to fix it. So do you think that again, the skills, right? Like, do you think this is another area where analytics comes with more than just data? It's change. It's hopefully it's positive change. But do you think that it's part of this as you're designing your organization? Do you think underpinning that with change management and other elements of the of the org is required to then kind of mature you if you're going to be a very predictive HR organization?
Yeah, absolutely, because you have to be able to solve whatever problem you find, right?
Act upon it, right?
Yeah, and so if you have if you have a narrow, if you've got a bottleneck in your candidate funnel, you got to be able to have the acumen in your talent acquisition team to go, increase the aperture of your funnel in the particular segment of the workforce that you're looking for. That may require technology, that may require more creative social media marketing of open jobs. And so, there's skills you need to bring with it. I think the other thing that helps, though, is when you tackle analytics, at least some of your analytics, as real significant projects. You say, I'm going to scope a project. We're going to go work with a key set of business stakeholders who have the authority to make the changes that we may need them to make. And that we can have an analytics team stick with it. So we're not just pushing this out in standard reports and analytics to an HR person who may or may not have those analytical skills. We've got a SWAT team that does have the combination of change management, analytical, and everything else, so they can deploy, stick with it, and really resolve some of the problems we find.
Yeah.
Foundationally, I think it's unique to hear a leader that speaks to analytics and the desire for analytics from that perspective, right? I mean, that's a very advanced view of the reason for and the calling to bring people analytics into the picture. I think more often than not, which is probably part of why there are these barriers and folks don't advance, in ways that they think they should. More often than not, when folks begin a people analytics conversation, they want reports and dashboards, and they just want data at their fingertips. And they're maybe the thinking is, well, that will help me identify what the conversation is that I should even be having or asking to be having.
Yeah. Do you think this is that analytics, right? Just predictive in general, right? Do you think it's something that a small business can do? I mean, obviously the power of the data that they have is much different. Nowadays we have a lot of benchmarking tools coming into the marketplace where even the smaller firms can get access to nice benchmarks and things like that. But do you think this is something that the small mid-market firm can do as well as the big company, or is this really just a big company solution?
Well, I think there's two things I'd say. One is,
is there a different way to approach it, I guess, in each?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about predictive analytics. As I mentioned earlier in my career, I was, and still, I'm amazed at what you can do by just good visualization of current state numbers and the target that you're trying to achieve. Right. And so I think it's easy with the hype around something new like predictive analytics, machine learning, all this stuff, to start discounting the value of what you can do with basic metrics and dashboards and simple pie charts that can actually show trends or can show which populations are different than other populations. So I should go focus here versus there. So I think there's a ton you can learn about your populations or about your business processes through more basic measures than predictive analytics. The challenge with predictive analytics is that it requires a lot of data or machine learning, right? You need a big data set. And so if you have a few hundred or a couple thousand employees, it can be limiting in terms of what kind of predictive analytics you can do. But I would say then your focus can be more on visualizing a current state and a trend over time and watching how it moves and acting on it that way. Everything, again, it's like not everything needs predictive analytics. Not everything needs to be a factor analysis question. Not everything needs to be, regression analysis. There's a lot of basic math that can be informative.
Yeah. And the emotional intelligence part, I think can't be understated, right? Like I've studied the predictive stuff, all the new tools. It's really neat. There's a lot of interesting things, but like you think about things like, flight risk and things like that, it kind of gets a little dicey. Like, is the data right that they may or may not leave? You may accuse them of something that's not, it just opens a whole can of worms. So, along that lines of predictive, right? How much of it do you have to balance reality with what you're seeing versus, maybe some biases that might have slipped in somehow? I don't know. But any thoughts on that, Dave? Like, how do you prevent that stuff?
I think, where I'm really curious, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm curious those models that predict, hey, Pete's probably going to quit if based on everybody else that looks or sounds or has a job history like Pete.
Yep.
He's likely to quit in the next 2 months unless you fill in the blank, right, with the prescriptive. Because from predictive, we were all supposed to go to prescriptive. That was the holy grail. And so we were going to prescribe that Pete needs a promotion, or he should do a cross-functional project, or he should get a salary increase. I'm not familiar deeply with the science on that, but I'm skeptical in that if Pete's not having a great experience and is likely to leave, throwing something at him is probably not gonna some new benefit is not necessarily gonna retain him. It's probably our culture.
It's bigger than one thing, right? Yeah.
And it's it's also hard to isolate market effects, right? We're in such a volatile time right now.
True.
How do you isolate the market effects, both macro job market, but also the micro job markets of your geographic areas where you operate, or if it's remote workers, the particular skill set they're bringing to the table. There's just so much to control for.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, there was another part that you talked about. I took away that, basics, right? Getting the blocking and tackling right, and not maybe swinging for the fences, so to speak. Pardon my baseball analogy here. But I think that's true in most things. But talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was interesting. You talked about, the case for getting the basics right first, being important here.
Well, I mean, there's a couple angles to it. One is you can say, let's crawl, walk, run, right? Let's make sure that we've got, first of all, good quality data. And I know we've talked about that briefly before, but this asset that HR holds and curates is increasing in value the more integrated it becomes within the HR suite of tools, but also as it becomes more proliferated across the other tools, technologies of your enterprise. So there's this core data asset to curate and maintain over time. And then upon that, just getting the basics of reporting and visualization right. There's a ton of value. I think back to a presentation that me and a colleague made early in my career in the GE days. And we were GE Lighting, the tiniest shave of margin on our products, right? Light bulbs that we were selling millions of a day, versus GE Capital and these other businesses were higher profit. And we're coming in with these cool Excel tools we built to manage the performance management cycle. And it turned out what we had added a ton of value, was super easy to use.
The Use Case Podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case Podcast.
And gave business leaders the information they needed with basic Excel calculations and visualization. So I'm a big fan of using the basics to tell the stories you need to tell with the basics, and then really picking the tough problems to point the higher level analytics toward. But just because you don't have either the scale or the capability to do predictive analytics, regression analysis, factor analysis, all these lofty, machine learning sort of things, doesn't mean you can't get a ton of insight from your data and have it and provide it in a super engaging way. So throw that out there.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Julie?
No, but not in that particular area. But I am interested, before we leave today, to ask Dave a little bit about kind of the technology and tools versus what else you need to kind of create a holistic, approach to people analytics and kind of expectations of the buy, and whether you see folks going into it looking just for something narrower than what they need, or are they looking for and articulating their needs in a way to set them up to begin to create the foundation for people analytics.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we talk to a lot of clients, and Julie, you and I too, I'm sure Pete, you do, that they're about a year after an implementation of some new technology, and they're kind of scratching their head. Like, I thought I was going to get all these great analytics out of, fill in the blank with, their big new technology. I think a lot of it goes to just expectation setting. But as far as the technology is concerned, I think that the basic reporting is going to be there in whatever big platform you have. Leverage that to the extent you can. Engage yourself in the user communities of the application that you've licensed. But I'm also a big fan of allowing your super techie analytics folks to use the tool they're choosing. So if somebody likes R, let them use R. If somebody likes Python, let them use Python, because that's not going to be the end user tools that folks are engaging with. We do see a fair amount of I don't want to overstate this, but disappointment with, I purchased this tool and it's not bringing the value. It probably is bringing the value for the core. It's the same stuff we've been talking about, to the core set of folks that are using it every day, but to the broader population, it's just hard to get adoption. And we just don't see a ton of adoption in the broader population with the more sophisticated tools. I don't know if that answered your question, Julie.
Yeah, well, and I have to say too, I think it's some of it is around when you're buying or acquiring the tools. So, if you're a first generation HR cloud buyer, I guarantee right now every salesman out there is putting, one or more, analytics named modules in front of you, and playing to the idea that yes, you're expecting to get to a new place, right? In reporting and analytics and dashboard and capabilities and just basic knowledge. The push is now to buy and incorporate those modules. And in reality, you might even ask an integrator to go ahead and price them and tell them when you want them deployed by. But you're not really sure exactly what you're trying to get to and what you need them for. At that moment, because you're not even new in your new environment yet, right? And so in certain respects, I feel like our excitement to get to that pushes us to create a situation for ourselves where we might have tools or purchase things that ultimately are not what we need, or we never get to them, and then that becomes a strike against us. And and maybe that's why in like the Sapient Insights research, we see such a high number of folks saying they need to change, they want to change or get to or do something, procure something meaningful in analytics. Might mean maybe they already have something, but honestly, they bought it too fast. They didn't even know what the heck they needed.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting angle here, which is that if you're looking for technology for a specific purpose, you want org view because you're doing a major reorganization, and you're going to use a tool like org view. And I'm not advocating that one in particular, but that category that allows you to do modeling of org structures and whatnot. Great, buy the tool for that job. As it relates to your more general reporting and analytics, one piece of advice I'd throw out there is don't end up out on an island. If your IT team already supports Tableau or some other tool, Power BI, whatever else, there's value in going with the tool that's already been adopted in your organization by finance, IT, and whoever else. The capabilities are going to be there. You might get some crossover talent coming into HR because they're great with the tool and they've always wanted to try it out on HR stuff. And as it relates to integration and other things, you've got the buy-in there. When I've had this struggle myself, and I've seen others struggle with it. When HR gets excited about a tool that's separate from what's being supported, then you're going to have to bring in all the expertise or hire consultants every time you want to change it. There's huge value in going with whatever data warehousing or visualization tools IT is already supporting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Don't go at it alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you that earlier, how much IT has to play a role in what you do. And I would say that most of your HCMs will tell you they don't need to do a lot of work for you, but you're right. I think I've seen that in myself, where an organization has that brand already embedded, you tend to get a lot smoother work out of it. So
let's be realistic, right? When you get those higher levels and meaningful, analytics to solve certain questions, there's some intersectionality that happens with finance data, for example, or planning data or budget data. And so, so there's a lot of, we aren't an island. Although we'd like to solve our own data challenges first, so that we feel like we have a good foundation. But
well, there's so much more power when you can bring that data together with business data and operations data, finance data, and really have a full view of what's going on in the organization. And that's that's where you can get that agility everyone's hoping for, and predictive insights to help you along. So Dave, anything else you would offer as lessons learned or just takeaways anyone should know about going off on the analytics journey?
I think we've covered it. Make sure you got the basics. Make sure you know why you're doing it. Don't oversell how much everybody's going to adopt it until you see how much everybody does adopt it.
Yeah.
And make sure underlying it all, it's good data. I mean, that's where you can lose the most ground. Is if there isn't good data to analyze, then it's all lost. I think there's some really interesting hype that we'll probably, Julie and I will probably cover in one of our upcoming podcasts or blogs, which is around this whole skills thing.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting area to follow. And again, to not make assumptions about how much your experience is going to align with the hype. Skills is a new area with some new science and probably hard to draw conclusions from right now. So I think that's an area that I'm curious to follow.
Yeah.
And I would say let's all watch the hype with, on the one hand, optimism and excitement. On the other hand, a little bit of skepticism around how it's all going to play out. And we'll have more to come on that.
Yeah, well, we would absolutely love to have you back on to talk about it. Julie and I are always looking for conversations, as you can tell. So anytime, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome.
So where can folks connect with you, Dave? I know I'll make sure that everyone gets your blog link in our description here on the episode, but where can folks find you at?
Yeah, definitely find us on LinkedIn. Heron Palmer is online as well on LinkedIn and with our website, so you can definitely find us there, and we're here to help.
Yeah, awesome. If you haven't checked out the blog, be sure and check it out. I know I posted it on LinkedIn. Julie and I have both shared it. It's on the HR and Payroll 2.0 LinkedIn site, and I'll make sure that it's in the description for today. And this has been great. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure. Great chat.
Yeah.